We got grow bags on today. Let's get into it.
What's up, guys? It's Jack and Tim. We're here to talk all things no burp cure and all things post-harvest perfection.
Don't lose those terps. You know how important they are. Whether you're a cultivator nationwide, growgeneration.com, fave and under canopy lighting. We got raw rolling papers. It's the same thing that goes with Drip Hydro and our new sponsor, Plantsman Group. Go to FSOTD.com, get the newest discount code, and get hooked up. Let's talk about not losing terps.
So I went out to Colorado, February 2016. Everybody had a different methodology, and I was just, oh my God, there's no standards, there's no quantifications, there's no benchmarking, there's no understanding material sciences. A lot of the suppliers are selling product that is not clean, that would not meet food or pharmaceutical standards. There's a lot of opportunity to create value here and create infrastructure to allow this industry to become the best version of itself. That was our thesis from the beginning. Flexible packaging allows the best platform to create a solution that responds to unique environmental and physiological conditional requirements of cannabis across its life chain, and that cannabis is a acceptable everyday part of life. The thing about this product, next time you open and pop this up, immediately put your nose on it and there won't be any odor really. And then shake up the bag and really break up the gas. You'll be overwhelmed with the aroma of those terpenes. For us, we always envisioned, we never wanted to be the face of a company or face of products or brand ambassadors. We wanted the best grower the best cultivator If we ever got lucky enough where we, achieved brand status, that's where we hope to be.
All right, family. We're going to talk about terp loss today. We're going to talk about losing terpenes. We're going to talk about curing, storing flower. This is the new wave. We're here with Grove Bags today. Jack, welcome to the first smoke of the day.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, dude. So we've talked a lot about, you come from cultivation. We'll get into that. We've talked a lot on the offset about your bags and your product. Can you explain just a little bit about what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So the team and I at Grove Bags, really everything we do is about optimizing post-harvest processes, biggest of which is the curing and storage and long-term viability of flower. So that's the name of the game for us. And our flagship product is the TerpLoc film that we make for curing and storing cannabis flower. And that's celebrating our 9 years of being in business with that actually on Saturday. Saturday will be 9 years of business, March 1st. For us, a big milestone. So excited to be with a few members of the team at Zod Olympics to celebrate. And obviously I'm excited to judge some flower.
And you guys are the official bag of Zod Olympics.
Yes. Reason for that. It's a top flight competition. You gotta keep the flower ready for competition. It's got a long supply chain with this stuff, and it's important to make sure that it gets the judges the way the cultivators intended.
Yeah, you can really tell too. Anytime, I was telling you before we started shooting that anytime I grab a Grove bag, someone hands me something, I can tell immediately. And then when I went to open the judges kit up, the competitors, I'm like a pretty sturdy type of guy with some muscle behind me. It takes a little bit to open them up, which just shows me that there's a real seal happening.
Yeah, those are our new zippers that we've been phased into everything as we've been constantly trying to just improve the products. So we're really we're proud of that. But yeah, it's the whole package. Really the strength of that new zipper that we've implemented really reinforces the ability of this material to create a kind of membrane or a lung for the flower inside there, which we'll get into in a second. Really allows it to present its best version of itself to the consumer, in this case, the judges this weekend.
Yeah, because you can almost tell it does act as like a curing container. Could you speak about that TerpLoc? Because every smoker out there, it doesn't matter if someone hands you a nug or if you're growing hundreds of pounds, like the number one thing you worry about is losing your flavor and your smell. And they go together hand in hand.
I think in this business, right, I think the reason restaurateurs and food people do so well in the space, if you think Ryan from Doja or, James Loud or, any countless number of people, even our very own Lance Lambert at Grove Bags.
Yeah, shout out Lance from Grove Bags.
Shout out Lance. I think the reason that translates so well is I think it's very understood the ruthlessness of you're only as good as your last meal in the food business, but also in the food business, people taste your product first with their eyes, right? Well, in the cannabis business, with their nose. And that's really the importance of, the school of thought and this product, and really the post-harvest curing and storage process in general.
Yeah, you're right. Because first thing someone does is they rip open the bag or open the jar, and they do one of two things. They either smell it first or look at it first. But the second thing they do is either look or smell. It's vice versa. Look, smell, look. It's so important because it's almost like a meal, right? If it doesn't smell good, it's hard to get past that part to be like, oh, am I going to enjoy this experience? With the TerpLoc, with your bags, go into some of the actual technology with TerpLoc.
So everybody, at home and whatnot, and you and myself, we're all very familiar with this type of technology, use it every day. This is a very specific blend and composition of a class of packaging called passive modified atmospheric packaging. And the reason we're all so familiar with it, excuse me. Imagine you go to the grocery store, shopping down the aisles, maybe grab something we shouldn't. I've certainly been doing that lately because we might be a little high. But we go to the produce aisle and see those pre-cut, pre-washed bags of salad, right? And in those bags, everything is chopped up, ready to go, right? And you're familiar with those products, right?
Yes.
Cool. So
my go-to meal for the grow is 2 chicken breasts, throw some good marinade on them, and a bag of salad, possibly some rice. But it has to be very easy. So that's my go-to.
I should get in that habit.
Well, it's easy at the grow, right? You can have a George Foreman, the chicken's taken care of, and a microwave if you want the Uncle Ben's. But flip side, a bag, give it a little shake. Yeah.
That's a good process. A lot of flexible packaging in that process too. But we'll circle back to that later. But anyway, about the bags, you'll notice, right, Lance, that it's a bunch of chopped up lettuces and radishes and carrots and maybe some onions or Brussels sprouts. But all of these vegetables are very volatile and will start to wilt very quickly, right? If they're on your counter, it might wilt within an hour, depending on where you are, or less. And brown start to yellow. It doesn't happen in those bags. Those bags, you can put them in the fridge, and for a couple of weeks even, it'll maintain the crispness and brightness and taste and texture and nutritious value of those vegetables. That's the same basic idea of what's going on with TerpLoc as what's going on with those salad bags. So salad bags are tailor engineered to maintain a specific atmosphere, in particular gas mixture within those bags. They're using the moisture vapor that's coming off those fresh vegetables and the headspace pressure that's created in the bag subsequently to create the ideal environment to try to elongate and prolong that supply chain. It's very important in produce, not only for food safety and viability and health, but also it helps dramatically cut down on food waste, because at least here in the United States, about a third of our food at least goes directly into food waste, what we produce. So it's very, very cool class of technology. It's pretty incredible what we can do with films these days. So when understanding cannabis and kind of understanding the difficulties with post-harvest with drying, curing flower, we really looked at passive modified atmospheric films as the best way to achieve, what we hope would be the best environment for cannabis. So after a lot of testing, some different additives, some structural changes, we dialed in on our formula, which thankfully industry has found a lot of value in.
And so does it breathe?
What it does is there's not a gas exchange in terms of through the opening. It's through the layers of the film. So there is a gas exchange on a microscopic level. What's going on there? And it's the reason we say with TerpLoc, you need to maintain a certain environment with the flower. Really, we've got a whole process which we'll get into about water activity level and free versus bound water and our philosophies around that. But really with the film, what's going on in there, once this bag is sealed, we really recommend heat sealing it. Glad to see most of these entrants and Olympics did heat seal these bags because really helps keep the product fresh. What's happening when it's heat sealed, it becomes an impervious environment and allows that to create a really strong and powerful barrier in there. Because even the best zippers in the world will have about, say, a 32nd of an inch or so gap on either side of them, or even tighter than that. You can get powder tight and watertight zippers, but you can't get truly 100%, even the best zipper in the world, airtight. So you will have some rate of uncontrolled oxidation from that, which is why I really like to see it being heat sealed. But I'm sorry to rabbit hole on that,
because
on that detail. But
this is something people skip over a lot, Jack. And I think this rings true with all packaging is that, and I just found this out myself, is that when it's actually heat sealed, side by side with something that's not, even though the top layer is already pushed together, the zipper is closed, there will be a difference in oxidation and exchange. I had someone recently get some bags that were heat sealed and by accident, just extras, right? And then I had side by side some that weren't. And it's so funny you bring that up. But one of the things he brought up to me was like, hey man, everyone's liking the ones that were sealed, like better. And I'm like, it's the same batch. And that's funny that you mentioned that now, is because that's exactly what we were seeing. That something about actually sealing, that makes a big difference.
Absolutely.
Because some people just want to close it and be like, it is sealed, and then they can look at it.
Yeah, so
but it makes a difference.
So open that up for me right now.
Just that though, for people listening, it definitely has, you got to put some effort behind opening, which is a great thing because it shows that it's very sealed. Like this enclosure is not easy to reopen. You know, it definitely has a good zipper pull to it.
Yeah, we're real happy with these, but also this flower just, I think it came out really well.
Yeah, I mean, you got basically some of the best cultivators in California putting their best flower involved in the competition. And then they chose grow bags. I mean, that says a lot for sure.
Yeah, we're honored doing this. Is really healthy, nice flower. All the colas are, very consistent. The moisture is perfect. The color's good on it. I can even see without a microscope, the tracks are really nice and healthy on it. And the way that's been allowed to happen is this environment that's been heat sealed in here, and the vapor pressure is coming off there. It's allowing the bag to have that precise in-gassing and out-gassing that we talked about, and really that totally sealed environment, no oxidative leaks off the side or anything. And the benefit of that is it acts as its own little curing and storage chamber, because what's going on in there is it's trying to promote about a 98% hydrogen-nitrogen balance with about a 2% oxygen level, which allows a little bit of residual enzymatic digestion of some of those chlorophylls and sugars, and from an unbalanced or unproperly cured flower, and allows that to digestive process to continue to happen very, very slowly, but in a controlled way. So, which is why you're getting these really homogeneous, beautiful flowers. So,
AKA in layman's terms, just a proper continuation of a cure.
Exactly. I mean, really, for us, we think that there's a very strong differentiation between what is the drying and cure process for flower. And I'd really have to say that for us, drying is not a process not a function of time, not a function of relative humidity, not even as much a function of moisture content as a function of water activity level. And I think that flower is done drying when it's reached a water activity level on a gradual slope of 0.6 to 0.62 at max. There are some theories out there that say cannabis is a general crop and you can proceed to a water activity level as high as a 0.65. Personally, in our experience, we would disagree with that, given the structure of cannabis, the spongy, very porous structure, especially with the large delineation of cola sizes, as well as just what we believe we understand about those residual enzymatic processes. I think the upper limit will be 0.6, 0.62. But you as a grower know what I'm talking about. All things in cannabis, it's really pong, right? We're looking for
why can't it be black and white? Yeah, man? Just give me an answer.
We're looking for manageable relationships between kind of the thresholds, right, and kind of that pong sense of everything else that we're doing within our grow room. We really endorse and preach for kind of that 0.58 to 0.62 water activity level, and I think there is something to be said for slight differences in there. If you're able to use really sensitive instrumentation for measuring between different terpene profiles, there's something to be said. Well, even in a cannabis industry 10 years from now down the line, when we're talking about TerpLoc, there could be 3 or 5 different types of TerpLoc depending on what terpene profiles we're talking about, and have really standardize these processes around.
It makes so much sense. I mean, because not every flower is the same, even density of flower. And then, like you said, volatile terpenes, some are way more volatile than others.
Cultivators, under canopy lighting is changing the game. And with that, Faven Under Canopy Lighting. They're one of our premier sponsors, and it's a brand we truly believe in. If you want to check out favenlighting.com, you can get all the answers to what under canopy is and is how it's changing the game. And guess what? You're family, so we hook you up. The code is FSOTD, and you get hooked up with Faven Lighting. They put together a full layout of how you would set your facility or grow room up using their under canopy lighting. Whether you're using CMH, double-ended, fluorescents, LEDs, it doesn't matter. Faven Lighting has you covered. Go to favenlighting.com, use the code FSOTD, get hooked up, and change your grow game. Come on, cultivators. First Smoke family, we are linked up with the Plantsman Group, and so should you. Making sure your IPM predatory bugs and beneficial insects get to you just like they should, alive and hungry, ready to do work in your garden. Doesn't matter the size, the Plantsman Group has you covered. Plantsman Group is a grower-focused company working to bridge the knowledge gap in cannabis regarding the use of beneficial insects to control pests. They will make a custom IPM plan just for the First Smoke family for free. Provide top-tier customer service and offer free shipping on orders over 200. Go to theplantsmangroup.com/firstsmoke and get hooked up. Trust me, it's a game changer. Let's get back into it.
You mentioned gradual slope.
Mm-hmm.
That's very specific. You kind of move through that, but we see a lot of huge drying racks and ways to dry your flower in 24 to 48 hours. Why do you say gradual slope?
The agitated drying will just dramatically increase the respiration rate of volatile terpenes that is going on there, right? And that's just a qualitative loss. And that's one of the big advantages of our system. And that's why this is so endorsed by a lot of your guests here on the show and a lot of the brands they represent. Got a great, ambassador and longtime power user of our products coming on your show soon. I'm sure he'll talk about what we're doing together at his convenience there. But really, one of the tremendous things is when we talk about, circling back, right, that standardization between the drying and curing process and that water activity level protocol. When we approach that water activity level in that desired range, then boom, we're done drying the product, and then we're ready for curing and storage. And one of the radical things about our products that it's really, always caused skepticism and why we are so consultative and trying, hey, just, try it. That's how I like it. Try it. Try it. I'll give you a couple bags. Sure, we're here today, right? I came to this trade show. We're talking. I'll give you a couple bags. Put
it to the test.
Yeah. Your name's Mario from Trubisky. Yeah, absolutely. I'll give you a couple bags. That's
go. Yeah. That's the homie.
Very much looking forward to catching up with him at Spanibus. He's definitely the homie, but that's long time tastemaker and somebody that. I just picturing in my head the exact situation.
And he goes all out with his packaging.
Yeah.
Like he is very careful. He's one of the guys that every time he hands me something, I'm staring at the packaging first because I'm like, holy shit, this took a lot of thought process.
He's a branding and marketing businessman as well as a tastemaker and curator in our space. But I think he's scientific and exacting about flowers. Why we that's somebody we're proud to do business with, and certainly we started a credible client. If you can win somebody like Mario's business and work with him and have his confidence and endorsement, totally on your product. And it was, something that I think a lot of entrepreneurs, aspired to when they were starting in the ancillary. You could be doing nutrients or a lot of these, different products or processes to try to be value added to the cultivation vertical.
But you're talking about the general slope or the gradual slope, of.
Yes, and the best way to achieve that gradual slope is with a passive modified atmospheric exchange, because there's no evacuation stage here. Once we've properly dried that flower down to 0.58 to 0.6 W water activity level, we'll put it in the bag, we'll heat seal it, and then we'll set and forget it. Ideally, we'll leave it in a non-dew point abusive situation, so we'll keep it above 40 degrees Fahrenheit or below 70 degrees Fahrenheit. That's really the ideal range to not manipulate out of the dew point or cause excessive respiration of the terpenes.
So your room that you're storing this product
That's
in
ideal, but your
is meaning
temperature,
below
your
70
temperature
degrees.
with this product is more important than the relative humidity once you've actually it's sealed within the bag, particularly once you've heat sealed it within the bag. But we can kind of get into what we've learned about temperature with cannabis and bulk cannabis and shipping cannabis around the world, which we do all day, every day.
It's really good, interesting point that you brought up though about water activity levels, because the whole goal for a lot of cultivations is to dummy proof things and to standardize things so that when they do hit AAA batches, it's carried through to the consumer at that same level. And so do you think there'll be a day, I guess is my question, do you think there'll be a day where dry is based on water activity levels and testing that versus the bro science we use now a little bit?
No question. I think the secret behind consistency and quality in a scale environment is having quantitative benchmarks to very qualitative processes and procedures. Traditionally, what does a stem test, what does that really transfer to? How can I reliably translate a stem test from a great elite cultivator that is produced in a number of environments, indoor, outdoors, mixed light, running a variety of genetics and nutrients, in a variety of environments. How can I replicate that touch and feel? I can't, but I can use data and work with the most talented producers in that field to create quantitative benchmarks to allow us to elevate qualitative standards.
Yeah, because right now it's like, Jack, it needs a snap. You're looking for a crack of the stem and you're like, what? How do you teach that, right? And you're trying to teach how it doesn't bend, it breaks. Like there isn't a standardization for cure or dry yet. It's 7 to 10 days or sometimes 2 weeks. And no, we do full plant 3 to 4 weeks. No, we do, we break everything down and de-leaf and then it's 7 days, I think if you're measuring water content, you can probably eliminate or at least dial in your process no matter what you do. So if it is full plant, you could dial that in, or whether it's a fully broken down, just buds, that's also very easy to dial in then too. That's interesting. It's the first time we've had that brought up, is measuring water content for drying versus every other technique.
I think the water activity level gives you the best clue as to where the process or where the flower is at in its post-harvest enzymatic life cycle. Right, and we're consuming those residual chlorophylls and terpenes and waters and sugars, producing flavonoids, cannabinoids, terpenes, sesquiterpenes, and some of these other compounds, and really, elevating the synergistic properties and entourage effects of that cannabis. That's really best achieved, as we've seen both from our data, anecdotal data, third-party data, and many of the best growers who know using this product at this point. Achieved with a steady no burp cure, and really that's achieved passively using very intense quantitative benchmarking for the actual life process of your flower. That's
so interesting, because we've been brought up on this process of burping cure, standardizing your days, even though strains are a little different. Very interesting. As far as TerpLoc and some of the companies you're working with, because I've had some of the best companies out there handing me you guys' product or their product in your bags. What are some of the other people you're working with? Proper Doinks was one I was just on the phone with before this episode.
Connected, Alien Labs, Preferred Gardens, Ball Family Farms. I'm trying to think California and LA here.
Give me anybody. Let's shout them all out.
We're working with on a monthly basis everywhere from large MSOs to small mom and pop growers. I'm trying to think of stuff your viewers will recognize.
How many people are asking you guys
enjoy
for die cuts? Do you guys get asked a lot for die cuts?
Yeah.
Or custom sizes?
More for custom sizes, less for die cuts.
All the hustlers now listening are going to be hitting you guys up. I already know, because if you put this next to a normal bag, you can tell the difference. Like it's not just something that's scientific that you can't tell until the bud's been over dried or under dried. You can tell by just messing with the bag and feeling it out that there is something different between this bag and all other bags. I'll give you guys that. Like every time someone hands me the bag, I'm the quality of it is the first thing I tune into.
Appreciate that. It's a totally domestically made product with all domestically made components now. Where's a lot of your viewership? I'm trying to think like where to.
Our top viewership, it's funny, the breakdown, man, you'll get a kick out of this. So it's, if you go state to state in the US, it's California, New York, Texas, and then Florida. But if you go country to country, what's real interesting is it's the US. I think it's something like 75%. But then it used to be then UK, Spain, Germany. And now it's the US, Germany, UK, Spain. So that's kind of like the flip of it. But yeah, US is just very heavy into cannabis, man. You know, that they're every little edge someone can get makes such a big difference in this game. We were talking genetics before the pod.
A lot of people want to be in it. It's a competitive business.
So something like this, where they can make sure their product is obviously dried properly, but then put in a container where when it gets to the end consumer gets it like it looks on the vine. Do you have a lot of people putting trays inside your bags now?
More and more.
Yeah.
And even on the MSO level.
Every time you name brands that you guys are working with, it's brands that are thought of as some of the top brands in the world. Because
even the first recreational cannabis that was sold in Germany. If you look closely at that photo, you'll recognize the bag of that flower's in.
The homie's got a Grove?
Of course.
That's awesome, bro.
Yeah, because we're one of the few companies that can fully meet those standards. And of course, in terms of thinking about EU GMP and some of these global regulatory standards for cannabis, which we are in a very much integrated global market, one of the blessings of the position that we get to be in on our team is getting to have a really great perch to that, is maintaining water activity levels in flower, but also having no active adulterants to the product post harvest. So you will see even more than you have right now, a lot of stabs of trying to solve that problem.
What does that mean? Break that down for me a little bit.
So what that means is having products that, in a product like the advantage of this product is we're just using the natural moisture content within the flower in a very tight custodial protocol in terms of the life cycle of this product, as we would if we were, a mainstream agricultural producer on very tight operational margins, right? Because especially to us in cannabis business, when 0.1 gram of end consumer weight can be as much as $1 of top line revenue at the dispensary level, every little bit of weight matters. But zooming back out of that, what's going on there is there can be no adulterants to that flower once it goes in that bag. So you cannot use anything to add in moisture, whether it be any of these different humidicondensicant solutions, any of these different types of gas scrubbers, any of these different types of products. It's uncompliant under their existing pharmaceutical structures.
You're not adding anything.
Exactly. The advantage of this product and one of the core tenets of our philosophy of post-harvest life cycle for the flower is that properly grown, stored, harvested flower should all, there's enough natural moisture where if you're properly managing that through the supply chain, not only do you not need to add any sort of replicants or do anything to, rehydrate or, I see a lot of, companies kind of, they're playing that expanded Pong, right, that we talked about earlier, where instead of operating in tight margins, very strict water activity levels, they're rehumidifying and over drying and really in this process, they're dramatically stressing the flower at both ends in a time consuming and costly process that also not only is financially costly and operational efficiently costly, but also very costly in terms of the quality of that flower, because not only the duration of that process, but the extremes that flower goes in terms of over drying and also possibly being far too moist and needing either a corrective action or needing to at the very least be rapidly and very potentially at a high temperature over dried. All of these things are opportunities where tremendous volatile organics compounds are really respirating and being off-gas from the flower. So really, if you walk into a room and you're smelling a tremendous amount of terpenes, that's quality degradation that you're really smelling there. And the thing about this product, next time you tear one of these open and pop this up and really immediately put your nose on it, and there won't be any odor really. And then shake up the bag and really break up the gas barrier within that bag that's formed naturally. And you'll be overwhelmed with the aroma of those terpenes, but you'll notice because all these have had some time in this TerpLoc material, you won't have any sort of hay smell or any sort of chlorophyll smell because these products, all this flour has been allowed to go through its natural and optimal enzymatic and digestive process. And that's why it's worthy of the Olympics.
Yeah. First Smoke family, are you a commercial cultivator or retailer and you want to get heavily discounted hydroponic equipment? Grow Generation Pro Portal just launched. The Pro Portal gives you exclusive, heavily discounted access to top tier hydroponic products direct. It's a one-stop shop for all your hydroponic needs, spanning every category you rely on. Plus, they ensure fast, reliable delivery anywhere in the United States. Need a customized quote? Want to track your spending? The Pro Portal lets you do both, and so much more, including providing easy access to your partners with its cutting-edge features. It's designed to meet the needs of today's fast-paced industry. Ready to take the business to the next level? Go to growgeneration.com and sign up with the Pro Portal today and get hooked up. No matter the style smoker you are, Hemper has you covered. From unique glass and smoking accessories designed right here in the US, I absolutely love this discreet battery. Super cool. They have a subscription model and a huge website with unique products, smoking accessories designed for the everyday smoker just like you. So all you have to do is go to hemper.co, use the code FSOTD, and get hooked up with a new rig, a subscription box, smoking accessories. Hemper has you covered. Hemper.co, let's get back into it. Let's talk about the journey to come up with this, because I'm sure this wasn't one and done. This was a process of you producing a bag and then doing tests, I'm guessing, tons and tons of tests. Could you walk us through how do you get to where you're create TerpLoc?
It's a journey that really starts with my older brother, Charlie. He's got cerebral palsy, which he's had to, really adapt to and champion and be a warrior every day to, live a good life and squeeze some joy out of a day with. And seeing the effect cannabis had on his life really, really blew me away. Coming from Cleveland, coming from Ohio, Los Angeles and California in general is a pretty remarkable place in some ways. And, my brother's a pretty remarkable person. He is the first fully, disabled person, first person to dictate their final exam from law school in the state of California. So he graduated from UCLA Law, which I'm super proud about. He's a lot smarter than I am. But growing up, we shared a bathroom in the house, and I had everything in like a shower caddy because both cabinets and our bathroom were full of all sorts of pills for muscle spasms and pain and the side effects of those pharmaceuticals and side effects of other pharmaceuticals. It's actually a very famous case against Eli Lilly, which my parents advocating to try to get a trust for my brother from Eli Lilly. If for those of you that like to go crazy on the internet and really research things, and dives into this whole kind of backstory and everything and what he's had to fight through, but. The relief that cannabis has given him has been tremendous, and it's turned me into an advocate. And everybody has their aha moment with the plant. You have a lot of incredible people on here. Really, the people who built the cannabis industry. I make a product that those guys like, but would like to think of ourselves at our team as the people that have helped standardize or improve qualitative standards. But they built the industry. That's quite an honor. You really have the people on the show who built the industry, and each one of them has a moment or a story. Or something that they looked and they saw or moment with the plant that was really like, this is for me, or intrigued them, or it kept them up at night, or it's an idea that came back to them later. They were in the shower and then, all of a sudden they were obsessed with this idea or notion. For me, that was when my brother was having really bad muscle spasms. He was hunched over and he was tight and his face was vascular. And he was, really uncomfortable and in a lot of pain. And he had, started law school out in California, had access to medicinal cannabis. This was back in Ohio. One of my friends and one of our colleagues who I won't name, came over and lit up a joint for my brother and got it going, and then gave Charlie a puff. And it was as he was coughing almost. You kind of see his shoulders roll back and his chest open up and kind of the spasms ease away and kind of vascularity recede from his face. And it was amazing. I haven't had many other moments like that in my life where just like it was where I was captivated by something. One of the only other times I can think about that was this is right after the FaceTime comes out, and this has got to be right around October, fall of 2012, maybe. I'm sure I'll be fact checked in the comments on that date, right? But I remember I was walking down the stairs at the train station, and there were two people FaceTiming, and they were talking, right? But they were two deaf people, and they were communicating in sign language over FaceTime, and kind of walked by, didn't want to be a creeper, kind of popped to the screen, and the person obviously in front of me was really animated, and the person on the screen back was really animated. It occurred to me that this is the first time that there's people who've ever been able to have a phone call, like that, and just the power of technology and the power of the world we're in. It just made me super optimistic and feel super empowered.
That's amazing.
It was the same moment like that with my brother with cannabis when he first took that hit, man.
Yeah, because you saw a perspective that a lot of people don't see, and I think it's easy to overlook that. Wow, we get to actually look at each other when we talk. Some people couldn't even use phone calls before that, so that's groundbreaking for them. Groundbreaking. That changes everything. Now you can talk to family across the country. You can talk to people across the world, where before, I don't know how you would do that. I don't think a lot of people have had that personal experience. So you were able to see this with your brother and see this working as medicine, which is easy to overlook. I felt like when we first got into cannabis, there was a lot talked about with the medical side and less these days. And you saw it firsthand.
Yeah. I mean, I've got some radical opinions there. I don't think I think it could be regulated differently. I think it can be taxed differently. I think all cannabis use is medicinal.
I agree. I mean, the taxes in Cali are already crazy. And then when you look at cannabis, it's madness. And so that story then, or your journey, goes from you being able to see your brother firsthand getting enjoyment out of this, not enjoyment, seeing the medicinal benefits of it, but then also seeing quality of life improve. Yeah.
But I grow for him and kind of got to understand the difficulties, the disjointed nature of information, trying to learn how to grow, getting genetics, getting seeds, doing it in a way where you're not endangering your parents' house, or, it was a whole universe. Right. And where I noticed a problem, at least for me in particular, is with a offsite, four light being with four light Rockstar, let's say, but being with that offsite, I would lose a lot of flower to obvious mold or aspergillus or other issues from very improper moisture management. And I did not understand, and I don't think there was a consensus understanding, certainly at this time, about regulating moisture levels and what drying and curing really even was. And at that point, is just proud to know when to harvest the plant, almost in a sense. So it was very painful to take the time to try to grow this and do all this and lose product or lose flower, and understood that there was something there probably that could be improved. So when Colorado and Washington went rec, I left what I was doing. I said, okay, this is real industry now, and this is cat's out of the bag. It's the United States. Once there's business and tax dollars flowing, and guys that donate money to senators investing a lot of their money in these businesses, cat's out of the fucking bag. Let's go. And very quickly realized that I was not the only one with that issue, and that there was opportunity to really create a lot of value if you could add in, great tools and metrics that could improve qualitative standards and operational efficiencies in space. And then, of course, you have to get to the point that everybody's doing so well at that point, and cannabis is selling so well, and people are showing up with trash bags full of weed in dispensaries and no COAs and selling it, that actually nobody gave a fuck or even thought there was a difference between drying and curing weed. But yeah, that's a different part of the story.
Some people still don't. And then some people in my opinion, take it too far. We get the there's always the sweet spot. You know, we've heard, 9-month cure. And I'm like, I've had weed that's 3 years old that my mentor used to put its harvest date like a birthday. And every year on its birthday, you'd smoke more of the batch. And we got to 3 years out where we're smoking the same batch. And I can tell you, it was not what it was, 6 weeks after, 4 weeks after. So there is a sweet spot where you try to catch that product in.
Well, you're talking about a non-fermented agricultural product, so there is definitely an ideal shelf life, particularly with the type of effect that you want to have from the cannabis. Even with an ideal storage environment, you will hit a compounding degradation cliff. I'd really say, even from our research, the most exotic terp profile is the most interesting flower in the world. Even if you take it and you put it in TerpLoc and you heat seal, and then you talk to somebody else and they're like, oh man, I really like that tech. Those guys are cool guys, good product. But, and then I take it and I triple heat seal it and, 100% high barrier nylon. And then I throw it in the freezer, and then I've got a very specific process of throwing it in the freezer, and I throw it in the fridge first, and then I throw it in an ice bath, so it doesn't have too much dew point abuse going into the freezer, and then I take it out slowly, and then I take it out stage, and then I put a cooler coming out, so it's not that much abuse warming up. Even if you go through all of that, and get as crazy and hypothetical and theoretical as you want, it's hard to see a arguable case for optimization of any sort of profile of the plant beyond 8 to 12 months.
And so,
although I certainly have flour in bags that do experiments with flour that's been aging and curing for 5 years, and you get very interesting testing results in terms of things like CBN and whatnot and degradation. But it's certainly not according to what I've tried to make in terms of a qualitative standard and quantitative standard for benchmarking for my notes profile. It's hard for me to see even anecdotally. And then again, we also have, much better research and understanding of the actual nature of the plant now than we did when we started the business. Before, when we started the business, hemp was not even federally protected. That was really a huge jump for us when we could take and said, high terpene, compliant, low THC hemp to food labs and really the top of the line labs and say, okay, we've got all these different control things. Let's run these different tests with all these different controls and all these different treatments. That was a big thing for us, because then we could take the cutting edge level of agricultural food science, life cycle technology benchmarking and try to apply that to cannabis.
So you're saying because of the hemp laws, a byfactor of that is that now you can legally test food grade products through labs, because
a company like Mocon is not touching cannabis prior to the Farm Bill. And it's not touching hemp prior to the Farm Bill. And we can, with low THC hemp, that's high grade. You can certainly learn quite a bit about terpenes and fatty lipid structures and volatility. And, very accurately, I would say apply it to cannabis.
So getting back into your brother's journey with you, can you explain more of how then this comes about? How does it all tie together with wanting product to get to him and seeing his journey and his struggles?
One, it was hard not to get excited about cannabis with the relief he had about it. Two, it was hard not to, you kind of, Ohio, I would say, in terms of the, pre-new era wave of cannabis, was a important market. It was an important stop. There were a lot of important Grateful Dead lots there. I just, you could kind of go back and back if you want to talk about the rabbit hole and the relevance and the importance of the Ohio, particularly Southern Ohio, growers community and whatnot. But being him coming out to California, got to see a lot of California medical cannabis. Kind of got to see the variety and the enthusiasm for weed out here, and smoked some of my first great bags of flower, and really it just kind of was more of just a passion. I would say something that I did for him, and he and I enjoyed together. Until you fast forward years later in my life, I mean, there were certain moments like if We want to talk about some ancient cannabis history.
Another passionate guy like you that knows the science behind everything and develops products and solves problems.
Josh, it's incredible if you think about the prevalence and awareness around raw and the brand that raw is.
Bro, what other smoking? This is what I love about this show is we get the people who are so passionate like you, guys like Josh. We're about to do a live podcast that'll come out after this in Spain in the 100-plus-year-old rolling paper factory where they produce raw. We're going to do the podcast with him, but
might have to tag along.
Yeah, dude, I would love to have you. Honestly, he keeps telling me bring more people, but what's cool is he's as passionate as you. So we get sometimes with owners of businesses and get behind the curtain and see like, what drove you to put everything into this? Because it's easy to see like, oh, this is why this person grows weed or this is why this person sells weed. But why did this person develop this product, spend, if not their whole life, all their money, passion, time, partnerships, friendships, sacrifice to develop a product for the industry? The shopping spree begins. Cultivators globally trust Drip Hydro. Whether your nutrient solution is in powder form or liquid form, Drip's got you covered. And we treat you like family. First Smoke 10 is the discount code. Whether you're in store or online at driphydro.com, doesn't matter. We get you hooked up. driphydro.com. Clean, effective, affordable. First Smoke family, no matter the guest, we're rocking raw and Elements papers. Whether it's the Elements king size wide, the raw fatties without the crease, so you still get the king size wide, but with unbleached and uncreased. Something we've been loving on the show is the raw king size blacks. And when we're lighting up, the Phoenix. This is awesome. Flintless residue, windscreen with a poker. No matter what products you like from Raw, you can check out genuineraw.com and that gets you to all their affiliate links to purchase these products direct from them to make sure they're raw authentic. Genuineraw.com. First Smoke of the Day sent you.
I mean, lot to say, and a big journey on, all those fronts. Certainly hit some notes there. I fundamentally, I think we believe we had a product that people liked. We believe we'd really hit it with TerpLoc in terms of something that was value added. It's always important. I have been told by people a lot smarter than me to build things for where our market is headed, not where our market is at. We knew operational efficiencies and qualitative standards and quantitative benchmarking would come into effect in cannabis. And it would, we would not always be in an era where, everybody in Oregon can pull down in a summer outs for $1,400 a pound. We always had a lot of faith in the product. For us, we always envisioned, we never wanted to be the face of a company or face of products or brand ambassadors. We wanted the best grower, the best cultivator, to them being a fan of the product, right? Because then that's a face of brand that for us, if we ever got lucky enough where we, achieved brand status in this space, that's where we hope to be, right? All respect to, Josh and everything at Raw, he's certainly an icon. Man knows smoke and knows papers, and they've built, iconic businesses. You could say that, Raw is the best known cannabis adjacent brand in the world. If you talk about brand equity in cannabis, which is such a difficult thing, right? Just like the brand equity in the restaurant business and the food business we talked about earlier, there's real brand equity in Raw. The distribution that Raw has is crazy. I've been all around the world for cannabis. I've been in well over 1,000 cultivation sites on 6 continents. The little corner stores that I see Raw in places around the world, even in places where you can still buy gasoline in glass bottles. Like it's a remarkable thing, and it speaks to the unifying power of the plant.
Yeah, because you're an entrepreneur, and at the same time, you can see people's wins and innovation. I yet to have seen any other rolling paper company with as much innovation and passion. I mean, Josh is the guy who's teaching me, hey, there's hundreds, if not thousands of little holes in the whole paper that it actually, yes, you do pull through the front, but it is actually pulling through the whole paper all at once too. But it's it's restricted at a certain airflow that's so small. And his attention to detail reminds me of the conversation we just got into. And this is the same with a lot of entrepreneurs who dive into this space and realize like how much more it takes, that you're developing a niche product, but that will help innovate the whole industry as a whole. So you and your brother, you're starting to solve a problem that you're seeing in the industry, and that's what, over dried flower in bags?
So I went out to Colorado. This is, March, this is February 2016. Go out to Colorado, go to some dispensaries. Everybody's got a different process, different theory, different, and none of them give a fuck what I have to think, of course. Right, but everyone has a different process, a different theory, different workaround, a different solution, science. A different band-aid. Yeah, you call bro science, also call girl science. I've seen some incredible, okay. some incredible
Anna
growers.
From Cam killed it. Yeah,
I one of the best, right? And now she's killing it in California with her team. But yeah, everybody had a different methodology, and I was just, oh my god, there's no standards, there's no quantifications, there's no benchmarking, there's no understanding material sciences. A lot of the suppliers are selling product that is not clean, that would not meet food or pharmaceutical standards. There's a lot of this is just the wild west. There's a lot of opportunity to create value here and create infrastructure to allow this industry to become the best version of itself. That was our thesis from the beginning. That and flexible packaging allows the best platform to create a solution that responds to the unique environmental and physiological conditional requirements of cannabis across its life chain, and that cannabis is a acceptable everyday part of life, just like Big Mike from Advanced Nutrient says. I will give him credit on that. I've always, first time I heard that, as a young entrepreneur in the industry, I was like, absolutely fucking right. Fucking A right. But therefore, you go into a gas station, you go into a convenience store, you go into a grocery store, the vast majority of products are in flexible packaging because they're consumables. It's the most environmentally efficient, has the smallest carbon footprint. We can get all into the material sciences and greenwashing and everything. And, we could talk into the wee hours of the morning about that. We got enough weed here, and you got some more soda in the fridge. So I'm down, but the fact of the matter is, cannabis is like we were just saying. It's part of everyday life. It's a consumable item. It's not a novelty item. And one of our theories was the vast majority of cannabis will be in flexible packaging one day. It makes most sense from a physiological standpoint. It's not a novelty item.
And so you start to say, I'm going to develop a product that I think the market needs. I
was reminded of that problem when I went through some of these facilities in Colorado, right? I was reminded of that problem that I had with, the mason jars all those years earlier. Yeah. And like, for those of you at home that like to, look up crazy shit, baller fucking crazy company. They've got a stadium, they've got a whole, satellite communications division. That's a crazy packaging company, that's just a fun one to look up if you those of you at home want to read about it. Interesting. But I was reminded of the same problem, and I saw these different workarounds, all these different, crazy techniques to address this thing. And I thought, well, how is, I thought back, how is the agricultural industry, kind of doing things, how we're addressing that. And I thought back to, well, how products in the grocery store handled. And I started reading, and the best analogous case study I could find to cannabis, because this is even, now we're talking right before, farm bill days and ideation days. So where do you start, creating parameters and start, dialing in those Pong things? And what even are those Pong? What are the walls of your those paddles, right? And that was hops. And that was, fresh live hops, because from an anatomical and structural standpoint, very similar to cannabis. And that's what we wanted to use and looked at, is high terpene content, right? A lot of case studies, a lot of white papers there about terpene content, fatty lipid structures in hops, in terms of learning about, kind of how they view that through the supply chain, and from a master brewer craft level in Europe, that's unpasteurized to pasteurized, fermented, pelleted, very unterpy hop. And, because we pelletize most of our hops here in the US, so kind of understanding and learning that was exceptionally helpful for us.
Wow, it's so interesting, because it not only is the end product similar to cannabis, but I think it's one of the only products you can
brew beer from cannabis. I've done it.
See, that's so funny. My mentor used to have a thing that THC is not illegal, cannabis is. So what if we created a variety of hops that has THC? And he's like, I mean, I almost think it was like he was explaining the precursor to what THCA would be almost in a different way, where he used to always say like, what if you had hundreds of pounds of this, mid THC hops? Would that be illegal? Because it's not cannabis. And it's like, well, you're definitely going to court over it for sure. But that is a very interesting play that you started with hops and do terpene off gassing. I guess, would that be the term?
Understanding respiration rates and understanding the structure of those fatty lipids, right? Those trichomes, I think, in terms of, an at scale industrial, case study and commercial case study, and also a benchmarked, industry with, qualitative standards, right? Seasoned, competitions, certified tasting levels, standards around aromatics and things like that, bitterness and whatnot. It was a very good, I think, framework for us from which to evolve from a food science and also from an agricultural life cycle perspective.
Let's say product one of what TerpLoc started as, or grow bags, to where you are now. How many reiterations of that or changes?
There's always tweaks and improvements. New zipper we're talking about earlier. There's always always trying to improve or look to other things. Is there better ways to make jars? There are better ways to do other things. Rigid modified atmospheric plastics, for example. Being able to have rigid containers that for example, totes that have and that the rigid polymers of those totes actually having the same sort of respiration and gas creation abilities as these tailor-made films that we have here in TerpLoc, right? That's pretty cool, right? You already see people picking up one of the things we're talking about in terms of adding anti-static elements. If you go way back and go dig into the days of who's putting out content first, right? We were the first ones to be like, oh, hey, by the way, 90% of your terpenes are hiding out in trichomes, and trichomes are super susceptible to static charge. So if you don't have a container that is either it's not anti-static or has some sort of way of mitigating anti-static charge, everything you see frosted in that container, well, that is all dramatic qualitative loss. And that's demonstrable, visible, like you see it right there.
Well, there's actually a tech called static tech, where they use
this is for dry sieving, yeah.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
So there is something to that.
For trichome separation, yeah.
And so I think this is something we don't talk about.
You're doing that with your containers, you're doing that with your unlined bins, you're doing that with your unsophisticated packaging. Really, for us, when we look at packaging solutions for any sort of product and any sort of life cycle of the cannabis industry, you have to think about things in terms of durability. You have to think about things in terms of oxygen transmission rates and oxygen levels. You have to think about things in terms of, odor and that OTR. You have to think about things in terms of durability, as I said, ultraviolet light, anti-static, and humidity control, or what's going on to account for humidity level controls. Those are kind of all those interplaying things that you have to factor in and take into account when you're trying to curate cannabis from that dry room onwards into its life cycle until its final delivery to the customer.
Okay.
Whether it be pre-rolls, cartridges, flour, edibles.
Let's say if you don't know, let's say there's brands out there that don't know if they're having significant loss or not. They're looking at their plastic or their product.
Give me an example of a packaging product.
Well, that's what I'm saying. So what can they do? Would the question be order a sample, put a side-by-side sample together of their current packaging and yours, and let it sit and maybe smoke 4 or 5 samples, one every week for 5 weeks?
Oh yeah, if you're talking about doing a side by side, like with
because some people don't know their problem. They think their shit's perfect, and then you try something that's better, and you're like, oh my god.
I think consultative selling is important in general. I think it's certainly important cannabis, to who we're talking about when we're selling to, ultimately cultivators. We're talking to cultivators and really deeply technical, very MacGyverish, happy to research things and to ad nauseum, happy to nerd out. I mean, that's a difficult base of people to sell stuff to. We of course have to be consultative and be, hey, try this. And if I were to say, hey, Lance, try this, or when I'm with one of your partners later this week and we're checking out their facility, I'm going to tell them and I'm going to say, I'd like you to dry your flour down to 0.58 to 0.62 water activity level. I'd, make a specific recommendation based off what I see in their facility. I'm going to talk about their drying process. Going to talk about the slope of that water activity level in terms of the post-harvest life cycle of that product. But then actually that hard, quantitative standard when it goes back, I want you to heat seal that, and I want you to set that, right next to in the same room, whatever environment. It's what you're doing right now. And let's track the life cycle of it. And let's revisit it in 4 weeks. We can test it. We can use whatever type of benchmarking sophistication you want. I'm happy to cover the cost of testing if you want. If I can make a case study and get endorsement from you and publicize it. Some people don't like doing that and don't like talking about their internal operational processes. But besides that, getting down to it, that's exactly what I'm going to say to them, because it really should be that easy. There's so much going on, especially in large commercial facilities, where if you're, burping and airing out and cycling and rolling and agitating, manipulating your cannabis and doing all of that, and really what you're doing is trying to account for something that you should have done in a proper drying environment, which is really account for that excess of moisture at that point. But say you're doing, part drying, part curing, and you're doing that pure burping, and you're doing some sort of evacuated purge, or using, one of these, different methods that are basically all burping or an evacuated flushing, purge, what we would technically call it, are tremendous qualitative loss points, which is why you see with TerpLoc versus other post-harvest methods and other packaging and storage and curing methods out there, you'll see TerpLoc used more in cups across the country and across the world than all other post-harvest curing and storage methods, I would say, combined at this point. And let's go to bat in the comments, because I would stand by that at this point. Just off the numbers, of course, there's always people out there that I'm still hoping to work with in this game I admire. And, I'm very curious what they're doing in some cases. So let's talk about it. But beyond that, right, like what I'm talking about, Lance, is the fact that this is maintaining, 33 to 40% more terpenes and cannabinoid spacing any way off you cut it versus any other methodology. And that's really harvesting the power of the plant and using the best what modern packaging technology has to offer. And what does that result in, and what does that mean for, us as consumers? Not only do we get to, go to a lot of those great grows and participate in some of those pheno hunts and taste a lot of amazing cannabis, we also help to curate events like this to their fullest potential.
Yeah, the best way to win over skeptical cultivators would be probably the nicest way to put it, is to show them side by sides and to prove it to them, and don't add any extra hindrance on their life or added cost. And I think when you can do that, just like what you're talking about, and you can show them, hey, side by side with what you're doing now, I'm telling you this is going to be better. Let me pay for your time and or make this happen for you so I can show you. That's how you win them over, because the larger the cultivator, the better the cultivator, the more people come in at them to show them what's going to be the game changer. Hey, I feel like the older the cultivator, the longer they've been doing their routine, the more solidified they are to that routine of like, well, I know if I do it this way, I'm going to get these results. So I love that, where you're going to go see, and I'll shout him out. Joe, LA Family Farm, is one of the homies, man. Great grower. There's so many. I mean, Cali is such a mecca for flower cultivation. The number one thing everyone talks about behind the scenes is dry, cure, and presentation. Like, are you using a tray? Are you not using a tray? What kind of bag is that? What kind of jar is that? Who's doing their packaging? You hear that a lot behind the scenes, because people know how important it is, but the end consumer only knows, does it look like it should on the vine? This doesn't look like it does online. You lost them then. And so what's with the microscope? What are we looking at now?
So I'm just kind of entering my notes for, and about to enter my notes for entry number 6. As I was saying earlier, one of the things I like to do with the entries I look at is just, I kind of test the water activity level, moisture content. I look at the health of the plant. I look at the resin integrity, resin structure. I look at the color and structure of the heads. I do all that before I even crack a nug open or grind it or smell it, or I'll even consider smoking it. Because like at these shows with 60, plus entries, you want to respect each entry as much as you can, and you want to really, give them the respect that they deserve, because it's a grower's work, right? But you can't give the best of your palate to everything. So I really will do an initial round and start grading and tiering entries based off of all of those metrics before I even start smoking. So I'll try to cut it down and maybe smoke. Depending on competition, I may only smoke a third of the entries, more than twice.
Based on how intact the heads are? That's one of the things you're looking at?
Based off the plant health, how intact the heads are, what the water activity level,
so if there's any
what the water activity level of the flowers.
Okay.
Any botrytis, are they clear, healthy, milky white heads? Are they yellow, brownish? Are they black? Or are they dehydrated? All of that I can tell just from between 5 and about 700 times here.
And then do you go like, hey, which brand was number 23? I need to talk to them about their storage. I need to improve.
Usually people try it and they reach out. And the reason we started doing this is Scott and the guys, they run a great competition, but their competitors were down for it and wanted it.
This is such an upgrade for previous years, to be dead honest, because even when it was jars, it was multiple different kinds of jars. It was like different brands of jars even sometimes. So then competitors always can pick something out.
Yeah, then you have to curate what you're doing to, you have to try to curate what you're doing, at least in terms of having enough moisture content to account for, okay, what's the temperature fluctuation going to be like in this jar because it's down to an eighth? What's the dew point of use going to be, right? Because we know this flower is going to go through extreme strength or extreme pressure. What's the barrier property, right, and the OTR and the quality of this jar? Is there some sort of gasket on this jar? Is there some sort of is there a lidding film on it? Is there sort of lidding seal? So is it foil? Is it foam? Does it have some sort of ethylene gas scrubbing component? And then people trying to, or who are familiar with these types of packaging methods, or operating a supply chain, a logistical chain over those types of packaging methods, have an overall empirical advantage. Maybe it's like, okay, no, actually I'm leaving something, extra wet. I'm leaving it at, 14% because I'm expecting to go through, abuse and, oxidative loss. At this point, we talked about oxidative loss with the highest quality zippers in this world, zippers that are, powder tight for protein powders, or that are even liquid tight for different food oils or different condiment applications, right? And very, very powerful barrier properties, but even still a little bit of gas leakage between those zippers. What's happening in these other containers? What's the range of it? It's very tough to accommodate for. Without having a standard, it's tough to have an industry, and it's tough to have a competition. I think standards of quality are what define industries.
Tell me about the importance for food grade.
In what regard?
A lot of the stuff we're seeing now, even in the containers that people will, after, let's say they buck off the stems, or when they take when they take the plant down from being hung and dry, or they're storing product, let's say even just the random person out there who sees a really cool little plastic jar and they decide to throw their flower in, the importance of having, like you talked about, a food grade barrier where the flower is not touching plastics.
So that film, actually, that's represented, that materials in every cannabis market in the world, because it's completely compliant. That meets British Retail Consortium. That meets the toughest requirements of EU GMP and pharmaceutical standards. Even in Asia Pacific, which is a difficult hurdle and something that we're proud of. But it's very important. People don't think about dirty packaging, free plastics. There was a time where I could sell against some of these really inexpensive import, not even metallized polyester, but full mylar bags from particularly from Asia. It's very tough competition, particularly on the West Coast for companies and like mine. And what's going on there, and what I could do is I could actually take a bud, I could rub it in a lot of those mylar import bags. You can still do this with a lot of die cuts, and you can take that bud and you can put it in the microwave and it'll spark. And the reason that thing's sparking is because it's picking up different particles of that metallized aluminum substrate, right? And
my God.
Yeah. So like there's all sorts of stuff to that, unhealthy, unclean inks, unbound plastics, particulates, the different things there. People talk about different zippers. Different zippers have even different styles of pouches and zippers make your material that you use relatively irrelevant because the barrier property of those zippers is so bad. You ever see those zippers where some of you got to dig into and you pull the lip, and then you pull a different part of the bag and you pull it? The slitting of that has a very, very high OTR.
Damn. And something you don't think about. So you're telling me that that kid has the weed touching the actual, there's no protective barrier, right? He's just stuck in the bag. When he puts that in his pocket and that thing is going, rubbing back and forth a little bit, right? While they're walking or while they're moving around, even in a jacket pocket, some pressure on it, that there's a high likelihood that then you're smoking plastics.
You're smoking particulate matter of the aluminum substrate, so it would be metals in that case, right?
Metals.
We're talking about a metallized
wow.
substructure, right? That kind of that mylar, that coffee, which people like because it's very high barrier, right? But obviously metallized, a very high stack charge among other downsides. And very high barrier means it's got a very low OTR or very very powerful barrier.
And the more volatile the terpene, would that mean then it would actually break down more?
So more volatile terpene, there's really a couple things to understand there. The more volatile terpene, I think a good case example would be the sesquiterpenes, or really the dominant candy terps, right? There's a reason we pull down, and you'll understand what I'm saying here as a cultivator, right? And then, tastemaker, pulling down a lot of candy cuts early because otherwise you have too much development and digestion of the sesquiterpenes for dominant terpenes. Very, very similar considerations, are impactful in post-harvest life cycle and chain of custody. And I'll say that because if you look at some of these storage or curing harvesting methods, a lot of these drying methods or a lot of these methods out there, they're trying to accommodate for a rapid dehydrating of the plant without consideration for respiratory needs. Without having a subtle bell curve, and then even throughout the curing process, you are consuming and giving off and destroying a lot of that Z. And I think that's why you see people who grow Z particularly, enjoy putting Z in our bags. I think if you look out for that, particularly in NorCal lands, you'll actually see that.
Yeah, we hear a lot of people
specific farms, but you're not only pulling early, but I think you'll see people putting Z in TerpLoc because Z, it very much helps Z as, given that very fragile sesquiterpene profile. If you, very carefully dry it and then put it in TerpLoc and then heat seal that, and you don't burp that, and particularly if that product is going through any sort of, dew point abuse or heat agitation, outside of that temperature range we talked about earlier. The fact that, the flowers has a very powerful, and especially if it's heat sealed in there, the fact that flower has the ability to take advantage of that very, very powerful gas exchange in that environment. It means that flower can stabilize in there. Those volatile terpenes don't escape the package and are able to reattach to the flower once from the headspace once it restabilizes in there, instead of remaining separated in the headspace in the container and then purged upon opening.
And then what are some of the stuff you found out about temperatures? If we go into just a little bit about that.
So temperatures really rate on the low end. It relates to dew point.
Dew point.
And we'll talk about dew point in a second. And then on the high end, it relates to respiration rate. And what I mean by respiration rate, it relates to volatility. So for every about 5 degrees, you are over 70 degrees Fahrenheit. You're more than doubling the respiration rate of those terpenes. But what it means by that is you're more than doubling the ease of those volatile organic compounds to separate from the flower into the headspace of whatever container it may be in, right? And then on the inverse end of that, really once you start, going below 50, then you're going down to 45, and then you're going down to 40, you're not only going down to dramatic slowing of residual enzymatic processes in that flower, right? But also what we're doing is we're changing the anatomical structure of that water particulate, right? And we're going for, actually into the frozen particulate matter, which does abuse and change with the structure of the flower a bit. And what I talked about earlier with dew point abuse, and whether or not we have enough critical biomass to account for that, is we have seen anecdotally just over the years of business, small amounts, 3.5 grams of flour, lots of fluctuations outside that will really stress the flower, and it really needs, even more higher barrier environment if it's going to survive that. And there's actually, we've had to develop a product for, particularly for flower that goes through those stress points in a particular protocol. And that's really a reflection of markets where there's very poor chain of custody quality for flower. Talking about flower sitting in, heated and in trucks with no environmental control, in cargo holds with no environmental control, in warehouses with no environmental control, in retail points with no environmental control, in shipping channels, regulated and unregulated, with nothing accounting for that.
Yeah, I mean,
yeah, but having that, and just last point, getting up to about a quarter pound or so, that's about enough biomass within a container to be able to account an average residual moisture to help prevent as much qualitative degradation from that dew point of view. But those are kind of those two. We're talking about pong paddles and that perfect range, right? Those are kind of the two on that in terms of temperature and in our opinion, post harvest, life cycle consideration for flower. Even more so than relative humidity, particularly after you've made a proper packaging decision. It's really those temperature ranges and how are we controlling that, accounting that for that. Not every market is like California with beautiful dispensaries and refrigerated vans and very, very well-heeled distribution companies.
So for just to dumb it down a little bit, the goal would be for cultivators high 50s, low 60s, or at the most mid 60s.
I would say I really don't like to see flower above 65 Fahrenheit. I really don't think flower should be below 40 Fahrenheit as a low threshold. 45 is an ideal threshold. If you want to talk about it in an even stricter range, you keep that flower between 50 and 60 degrees.
And we're talking
Fahrenheit.
finished product.
Yeah, that's
already dried.
That would be what your grandmother when she was storing a root vegetable would be considered cool, right? Yeah. The lower end of that range, cool.
It makes sense because you're talking about tissue and product. It's like think about when the hospital gets deliveries. It's never frozen. It's always on ice.
Well, freeze thaw respiration cycles. I mean, think about it with food, right? You're changing, molecular structures, right? Think about vegetables that have been frozen, thawed, unfrozen, even from a top brand that's using flash frozen or type processes, state of the art chilling, air chilling, or air freezing, no chemical additive, really, gold standard stuff like that for stuff you'd find in Erewhon. Even you take that and freeze and thaw, and so you see just what happens to the actual plant tissue structure.
Makes sense. It makes total sense. And so what are we looking at right here on this sample of the Olympics out of your guys' bags? You're looking at an entry and you have your computer pulled up with the microscope and you're basically looking at, did this cultivator have issues or improperly store it at the end?
I can see a lot about the life cycle of flower, just given the color of it, the structure of the resin, and the color of the trichomes and the resin heads. So I'm trying to zoom in here and start around 500 to 700 times, and I'll go in even as close as 900 times. And I'm really just kind of looking at the health of it right here. So I'm looking at this one, I believe this whole nug entry, which obviously it has the advantage of being a whole cola, is really, really beautiful and really nice. I'm seeing very nice color. I'm seeing healthy, well attached heads, even as I kind of zoom in at some of the smaller glands.
It's nice to know because not many people are doing this. Most people are just rolling it up and like, hey, do I enjoy this or not?
Well, that's not really the best way to do this. Now I'm gonna just do some elementary tests for on the moisture and try to get a baseline for the flower before I peel it open. So this is just a device that's designed for hops that will give me a moisture content, which again it's relative humidity is related, but not a direct benchmark value for moisture content, which is related, but not a direct benchmark value for water activity level, which is really the best measurement of homogenized, enzymatic digestive progress and life cycle stage for the flower. Or, better terms, how, smoking smoothly, smoking a very smooth, creamy smoke would be something that Also, it's not just the terpene profile of it or how it's flushed or everything. It's the actual where it's at in its digestive process and life cycle. Because a lot of those chlorophylls and sugars will have very strong taste to them when they're burned and inhaled.
Damn, guys. So when just know when you're entering these competitions, people are really analyzing your product.
Yeah, so that's right where I programmed it to be, right at about 11.
So that's where you want it.
So that's a healthy one. So let's peel it open, because also something that's important to note about flour, right, is that not only is there a difference, between the large and small colas that we're trying to homogenize, in the curing process and balance, but there's also a tremendous content difference between the stems, especially the interiormost stem, and the flour itself. That's why a lot of times when people are burping, they're burping with a long period. I might leave this toad open for 15 plus minutes, 20 plus minutes. Okay, well, that's usually whole plant material that wasn't dried properly, because that's not just that's not just curing. That's actual still a respiration process and not a digestive process, as I would put it, or try to urge them to think about at that point.
And so what are you doing right now?
Right now, I'm just, playing Pong. So I've got another device that we got programmed slightly differently. And this one's actually programmed to a very soft type of wood. And it's trying to give me, a good reading of the what it thinks the water activity levels is going on in there. I'm sorry, the moisture content. But yeah, like what we're seeing here is consistent with those readings, right? So we're seeing flour that breaks up nicely, is sticky, not overwhelmingly so. It's balanced throughout from the flour to the stem. It should smoke really nicely.
That's interesting.
But yeah, you see this thick stem here, what we're talking about earlier with people that are, burping flour. There's a tremendous amount of moisture that hides out in the stem, right? And this bud needs to suck it up. So people come back to their flour and like, oh, it was bone dry, and I've come back to it, and now it's it's really wet again somehow. Well, yeah, it might have been crisp to the touch, but it rehydrated. It's not going through a gentle process or a slow process or control water activity level custodianship for that flour, right? Because what we're seeing there in that exact instance is Lance's rapid rehydration of the flour from the stem of the plant. And what we're trying to do is trying to balance, and then you see this is breaking really nicely. This is really healthy flour. I'm excited to smoke this entrant. Benchmarks. I'm looking at it. It's healthy. I'm peeling open the bud. There's no rot, anything like that. The color's good and consistent.
It's interesting too, because you fact check yourself. So some stuff that might test out of range is also interesting, because then when you throw in the smokability factor and you try it out, if it does smoke different, or what about it does smoke different, does it hit what you think? Like, hey, it's going to be a little more harsh, or it's going to burn a little darker. The combustibility is going to be different, right? Or sometimes you might find something surprising that actually hits all the marks, but was testing out of range. Like it's interesting, because I feel like you get to fact check yourself too, where you say, okay, all indicators show that this should smoke proper. Will I like the flavor or not? But if it's not testing in range, what did I think before I tested and after? I don't know. I like that you kind of fact check yourself through the process.
I'm never that surprised by never.
I figured.
Not that I'm never that surprised by flour that is just everything that we just did here. It just looks really bad.
Yeah.
If it's bad at all these steps, I've never smoked it. I'm like, oh man, wow, this blows my mind. And I've smoked some ugly, shitty looking weed that turned out to be good. And I've learned some things about cannabis. I was just smoking a selection of flavors from Maine, and one of them was Thanos from these guys. God, I forget the name out there. I'd give them a shout out, but it's just the nature of it. It's an ugly, larfy, flower, but really nice smoke. It's very, very enjoyable, daytime, mid-afternoon, kind of active, social sativa. I enjoyed it. It's good flavor, smoked well, good ash, good smoke texture, like everything checked all boxes. It's just ugly flower, but even still, it would do well off these qualitative standards, right? Bag appeal does not exactly correlate to eyeball health. particularly not in an era where you can just pump the fuck out of a plant with a bunch of saline-based nutrients, and I can have something that, you know, looks great and has no flavor whatsoever.
It's synonymous with certain strains. Like if someone says, "Oh, it's a hash washing strain," you know what it's going to look like. It's going to be larfy with a lot of crystal content. Like it's the same thing with flowers. That synonymously over my 20 something years of smoking, some of my favorite strains were ugly strains. Super not pretty, but just unbelievable flavor, especially with some of the Thai varieties, and some of the long day sativas that almost turn orange and yellow. And you're like, no, because the orange and yellow usually means like, oh God, someone kept it in a hot car. And you're like, no, it kind of just finishes like that sometimes, you know? So you're going to go through each sample on the ZA Olympics kit, and you would go through and test them for all the factors that you do with moisture content, smoke them, and then make your rating system through that. If you run into, what are some of the things that you would see in the microscope or you would see that would make you not want to smoke the product?
Obviously, any sort of mold, microbial, you know, pest issue. You know, if I'm looking at a bunch of dead bugs, if I'm looking at very poorly trimmed cannabis and everything else is bad, that just correlates to something that people didn't care of. If I'm seeing the telltale symptoms of, you know, the UV light burning, if I'm seeing, you know, even you know, if I'm seeing just poor post-harvest techniques, if I'm seeing a combination of just an unhealthy flower and I'm seeing, you know, poor and dead resin heads, and I'm seeing, you know, undesirable moisture content, there is a certain point where, you know, cigars are a fermented product and not, you know, in every way a great benchmark to this industry. Or, you know, cigarettes are cooked, like, you know, and there's this it's like a whole different from a chemical, you know, food life cycle standpoint, but there is like an absolute range, right? Like there's a point where a cigar or a joint is like a pile of wet leaves and it's trying to light it and it doesn't really smoke. It just kind of smolders, right? Or it's too dry. It's a pile of totally dry leaves and it just doesn't really, you know, smoke. It just burns and it's all charred and everything, right? You know what I'm talking about there. It's the same basic idea for cannabis. It has to be indicative to me that it's, you know, going to be worth smoking in there, right? You know, if it's, you know, there's a lot of cannabis here, you know, if it's easy to eliminate smoking some of it, out of respect to the other competitors who do that to try to keep a clean palate. But also, I mean, I've got a lot of Excel sheets of a lot of competitions like this. It's a very intense, obviously, correlation to, you know, these steps we just talked about and the rest of the experiences we'll find out here as we smoke this one.
Hell yeah. And then with some
like,
of
I have a feeling this is going to kick ass.
With some of the bags we have on set right now that people are seeing on YouTube and on the video on FSOTD.com, what are we looking at? Is this, you're talking large scale, almost, is this a tote liner? Or no,
so that's one of our larger, we call them turpy bags, kind of a play on the turkey bag thing. But so you can see it's kind of gently frosted, right? It's almost got like you put your hand up to it, right, Lance? I want to call out something important about it. You see kind of that light milkiness to it. That's because there's so much ultraviolet light blockers suspended in our film. That's why it's not totally clear. Back when we released that product, you know, that's one of the things where we had to stand by where the industry was going. People didn't understand. No, you want this, and it's actually great that this material and this bag has that. And the reason it's great that this bag has that is because it saves a tremendous amount of degradation of the plant. It's actually ultraviolet light damage more than any other factor accounts for degradation of the plant from what we've read and what we've seen.
So this blocks that.
So that
with you also being able to see the product.
With you also being able to see the product. Because a lot of product is in storage and work in process product and product that is, you know, staying within a facility. You know, and it's just moving throughout the facility, and it'll be in final packaging before it's out of that facility. But it might have a 2-3 week journey before it's heading out the door.
Wow, that's really nice to know, because most of the time when I think light penetration, I think it has to be pitch black. So you're saying this blocks out the UV, so the issue that I would have with not having to black it out. And then here's the other option, right? Or what's this?
That's a 5-pound pouch right there.
Dude, this is dope. Okay.
Yeah, so something like that, you'll see those if you pop open go into a lot of rooms, some higher end flower facilities here in the state of California. You know, can That could be one of them. They're batching and storing and curing flour in bags like this. Preferred. Brent uses these over at his operation too. Even these are really endorsed by a lot of heavy hitters. But where this product's really popular is for some of the international shipments of flour that we're seeing medical market to medical market. It's a really good size. But the reason why someone would use the pouch side of that is, like I said, this is going for shipment. It's a larger amount of flour. Maybe it's more expensive flour that's going through a longer life cycle, and you want to be able to actually heat seal it. This has the added benefit of this particular pouch is laminated versus this bag. You can see there's printing on this. There's a zipper. There's a lot more tooling and manufacturing processes on this pouch than on that bag.
And is this also food grade?
Yeah, it's all TerpLoc. It's all made in the USA.
Wow, that's huge, man. For brands that want to store their products safely and know that there's not going to be static loss like we talked about earlier in the episode, and then continued loss for either UV penetration with light, and also you need a lighter? You got? And also loss with terpenes. I mean, and God, who wants to smoke microplastics and or aluminums and heavy metals? That's crazy. This is dope, man. I didn't realize they got this big. I like this because I'm a fan of something around 2 pounds, but I like to oversize my containers. So the most I'll usually put in a container is something like 2, maybe 2.5 pounds, just because of gravity. I don't like to stack it up too much.
I like 2 to 5.
But something like this would be great.
For the A-buds that connected, they use all 2s.
Yeah, and then I fill it up halfway, and then I like to just fold it over. But I really like the food grade aspect to all your products, man. We don't talk about it a lot. Some of the facilities we tour for the grow tours, they'll use food grade bins, and it's rare. I'd say out of 100 facilities I've been in, 2, maybe 3 do.
A lot of those black dyes, a lot of those, unbound plastics, a lot of that particulate matter, and then just using online bins. They're difficult to clean. If you're cleaning them or using harsh chemicals, they're stripping, plastics out. I see a lot of questionable processes. We also make a lot of bin and tote liners where it's easy to put TerpLoc in there, and people use that on their whip process, or say maybe they still got some bulk plant on flour, and then their protocol calls for sweating it a little bit more. That's a product that caters that. They've got bulk pre-rolls. We've got a lot of people that use these bags and fill them with pre-rolls.
Yeah, that makes
or even jars of flour before they go to the retail shelf.
Yeah, because one of the biggest issues is once you have these rolls rolled up, now that flour is completely ground up and exposed to all the elements, especially with how are you storing it? You should be storing it just like we talked about, I'm guessing, in a TerpLoc below 65 degrees.
Would absolutely argue that all day. That's where we're at. That's where we're coming from. That's our thesis that we contend to the market, right?
I like to boil it down for people. That's perfect. And then, so what are you getting into next? Because I love that everyone's got the yellow totes, the yellow top totes. Now they come in red, I think, but everyone has those black totes with the yellow tops.
People would use those for locked top. I mean, it's easy to store and stack and account for and handle.
But the smell of those when you get them fresh,
but
ugh. It smells like plastic. Like anyone's grabbed 100 of them.
Those are the industrial chemicals that, if not sold yet. Those are Vox that the flour is, of course, like a sponge sucking up. But yeah, I mean, we you see dirty packaging or improper packaging all over the place. There's a lot of bare flour or bare pre-rolls exposed to paper packaging. Paper-based packaging is cool. It's complete greenwashing. And again, I'm sit here in front of you or the Senate panel or anybody, and and any panel of experts and argue why I think that way. But beyond that, because it absorbs terps, it's porous, it's not an ideal material.
Yeah, I mean, anytime we've had product and it's in paper packaging, especially any type of flour, you know exactly what's happening. I mean, I've seen people dry in paper bags because there's so much draw of moisture out of the flour.
It helps for sweating, particularly if you're a home grower. Put one paper bag on top of the other. If it's a craft soy ink or non-printed bag, it's unbleached. That's an acceptable method if you don't care about passing microbials.
Nah, we're getting past that. That's why we're talking food grades. That's why we're talking TerpLocs. No, that's why we're getting into the heady shit. That's this episode. Because there are so many cultivators out there that want a better option and already have their bags or their tote liners or their bins. And it's like, damn, I didn't know. They're asking themselves, is the one I currently use food grade? You know, how do I integrate food grade maybe already into my system so it's not this whole new process I have to learn? And then same thing with the bags. You know, you're going to have a lot of people wondering if their bag, if you rub your bag against your product, am I going to now have metals on my product? And if that's the case, then yeah, it makes total sense to start doing side by sides.
It could. I mean, for some of these materials, because you know, in a situation where it's an absolute race where the operators have no margins, and they're trying to squeeze every penny they can of the operation. They're put in a desperate situation. They make desperate decisions. I've seen child resistant certificates that are with ridiculous things on them from bullshit labs and at bullshit addresses. It's it's very easy to kind of get into that grade because compliance and everything else. It's a cost. It's an operational burden. Saying no to running a really cool, really fun, informal bag that may or may not play off a very well beloved and recognizable cartoon character. Those are calls that we have to make, right? And those are things we have to respect.
And what's coming up for grow bags?
What's coming up for us? I think one of the biggest things is we talked about greenwashing earlier. I think one of the things we're excited about is monomaterial plastics that have advanced capabilities. So what I mean by that is single stream recyclable plastics that have the capabilities of multi-layer, these gourmet structures, these really high-end material compositions that are more single stream recyclable here in the United States, and also that make economic sense at scale for commercial application. I think we're excited about that. I think we're at this point, right, where cannabis has done some really interesting things in the mainstream packaging industry in terms of small batch printing and the drive toward digital printing. You certainly talk about child resistant packaging, flexible child resistant packaging, and different innovations there, especially. There's a lot of fun things that cannabis has kind of spurred and opened up questions about, but we're part of a $1 trillion+ global category industry that between containers and boxes and labels and bags and all sorts of packaging. If you think about it, is this blown out global category, all relying on hydrocarbons. The opportunity for sustainability and for revolutions in the way the material supply chain works in packaging is huge. In terms for what we're doing at Cannabis, we feel we finally got some really promising innovations in terms of self-stability of some other products, particularly psilocybin, which shelf life is very difficult. So we feel like we finally nailed something. We're excited to debut it once the rest of the kinks are linked out. We've been excited about that. We're very excited about a couple of post-harvest products, that we've developed, kind of help make the process more simple for drying and for the different stages of the product. So we've been experimenting with a bag that's not a curing storage bag, but it is a drying bag to kind of facilitate uniformity and efficiency in some of these rooms. Because one thing we've really noticed over the years going to all these different facilities and everything is people are experimenting with different types of paneling, different types of ventilation systems, different types of HVAC systems and really and fans, and it's an endless carousel to kind of achieve what we think in microbial standards. And it's kind of an endless carousel to think what we think we can operationally optimize and achieve. So that's something that we're still filing IP on and working on. We're pretty excited about, but we think there's an endless amount of ways still that we're excited about to apply and innovate and improve packaging to raise the floor, so to speak, and improve the quality of cannabis that we all get to smoke every day. That's the most motivating thing for us. And that's something that I tell the team too. Like, hey, fundamentally, like you have to be excited about the idea or the notion, or find it, exciting that I could be on vacation in Italy 20 years from now. And, the flower I see, was cured, stored, or transported, or it was presented to me in this, and your fingerprints around that. That's got to be something that's exciting to you.
Yeah.
And it's okay if it's not, but like, we're, a fluid business, a fluid industry. You got to stay excited.
Yeah. It's going to be interesting to see what you learn off of psilocybin and how that's stored.
It's just it's just such an unstable, volatile, poorly understood thing, or chemical structure, I should say. Right.
Yeah. That's what's going to be interesting about it, is what kind of correlations does it have to cannabis, and
no promises on that. That's extremely challenging from a scientific standpoint.
Yeah, but it'll be cool because now hopefully you'll be able to actually test, I guess you would be testing spore viability or spore potency. I guess viability would be the same as potency, or maybe not, and this is where all the mushroom heads will come in. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what correlation to spore viability, or I guess chemical viability within the psilocybin mushroom over long-term storage, like how to keep potency levels high, or if there is degradation in potency. Like that's all those factors are going to be very interesting.
It's very different than THC. It's something that the R&D team is certainly having maybe too much fun.
This batch is better than the last one, dude. Oh, fuck. Nah, that's funny. That's hilarious, but it's something that needs to be done because we don't have federal grants or any type of actual testing. So a lot of this is being done by companies who their bottom line is affected and they want to innovate in the space. And that's what we're seeing with you guys. So very cool to see, bro. And I love being able to sit with you and realize how much technology is behind this, that it's not just another bag.
Yeah. And then in terms of our fresh frozen product, I think we've got a good product there, which we're in the process of reiterating that and tweaking that a little bit. I think that'll be a great value add product, minimize freezer burn in terms of fresh frozen flour. But yeah, I really right now, it's world peace through terps. We're really in a very special time. I think both in the US and globally for cannabis. I think it's going to be another tough year. I think I think this is the critical year, in terms of a lot of companies, in terms of making it to that other side finally, with hopefully some promising changes on the horizon. I mean, I just think from all sides the industry is just so broken in terms of this regulatory disarray. You have some states like Missouri where the market, you could say in a lot of directions, is functioning, it's healthy, and people are getting above $2,000 a pound, and there's decent quality standards and health standards and yada yada yada, versus markets like California, for instance, where the system is at this point really designed to fail, and it's very broken down. Or you're in other states where the Delta 9 market is so intense that you have groups of cannabis business owners suing the state because they're saying, hey, I started up this business, invested in this business, and put my life savings in this under the agreement that I'd be the only place, or only one of this number of businesses to be able to sell cannabinoids in town. But every gas station, deli, and bodega in my area is a competing dispensary, skirting a very poorly understood, very poor testing regulatory standard for a gray market of Delta 9 and other types of hybrid products.
Yeah, well, we have the federal government that's sitting on their hands and just kind of letting states decide, but not allowing banking, but so you get all this gray market, because then they can play both sides and they can make arrests and stuff, and then they can leave it up to the states. And when you leave gray area, it gives a lot of operating. It's the same thing with Instagram right now, with like allowing cannabis on Instagram, or anyone that promotes cannabis, or what is promoting cannabis, versus, it just, if you leave enough gray area, for a company or the federal government, I think it gives you license to almost do kind of whatever you want within that space, instead of having to say what you're going to do. Just say, well, it's don't promote weed or whatever that is, or don't do this. So it's the same with federal legalization of cannabis. It's like, how do we not have interstate commerce? If we're state to state and we're butted up against each other, what would be the reasoning behind that? Because it's just very interesting where we're going. And I love people that are innovating in the space, bro. So it's very cool to see what you guys are up to. You got the whole team, the whole Grove Bags team behind here. You got Big Lance in the background, and he's super connected with, I mean, he put me in touch with the people for Mary Jane Berlin. You guys are involved over there heavy. Spanibus, I know he's connected with a bunch of people over in Spanibus. So it's going to be cool to see you guys expand. It's perfect timing too, because other markets are just now getting into where we are, where you've already innovated in the space for years. You know, they get to come in where you're already got TerpLoc. You know what I'm saying? It's not like, hey, they're figuring out bags for the first time. So it's cool to see other markets being able to adapt. But dude, Jack, awesome having you on First Smoke, man. And I'm looking forward to a Blackleaf grow bag.
Be a lot of fun to do.
We're relaunching. Yeah. First thing I think of is like, all right, I need to get food grade trays.
Well, even that tray, look at that tray, right? Like you can see that there are trichomes like residually in that tray.
Yeah. And I just can't, for me, I had a hard time going from an actual jar to a bag. It was very hard to convince me of that. And then one time I picked up 6 pounds of flour from a very known brand who has a very customized jar, let's just say. And when I picked up the 6 pounds, I was like blown away. I had to send, and it was just packaging. It was literally no flour. That's what's funny about it. It was just 6 pounds of packaging. And when I went to send it, no weed, just packaging. I'll reiterate that. And it was like mind blowing. It was like, yo, ground shipping is like $300 for just packaging. And just me carrying in the cases and just going through the processes of realizing, man, this just ain't it. There has to be a better way. That's where I realized, okay, I can go to a bag if I can, because this is the thing. People will post the flower that I was growing and I couldn't repost it because I'm like, it's smashed. And so they're showing off this amazing flower and I can see how it's just been hammered. I love that my tray fits inside your bags. But I would
say more people put bags in boxes now than put jars in boxes.
Yeah, there you go. Well, because dude, taking 5 pounds in bags is like one hand. Taking 5 pounds in jars, you need a little bit of a dolly.
Yeah, absolutely. There's aesthetic differences, right? And there's a way that look at this, this Myron jar, right? You got some nice labels on and some foil and holographic and printing on it, on a nice jar. Like, Myron's a good company. The jar has good barrier property, good ultraviolet like protection, but at the end of the day, it's not an active environment. At the end of the day, there's very high stack charge in there. At the end of the day, there's an aesthetic to it and the way it presents and all of that is great to it, right? But it's scientifically speaking not the best thing for flower. And also, that's you're positioning that top of market, right? And you're commanding, you've got a lot of money invested in that packaging. Fact of the matter is, that flower is going to get consumed, and unless somebody is going to collect jars the way a frat kid collects, empty liquor bottles in their dorm room at State. Like, what's the point of that other than a jar that can't be recycled because it's got, those attached to it and it's got all these different components and the lid's got all these different components. The best thing empirically for the flower and then reflecting the reality of supply chains is products like TerpLoc and solutions, that are constantly putting the edge. Thankfully, I think we've got something that the market responds and tells you is the best way to do things, but we're constantly trying to iterate and reiterate and stay ahead. We've got, great product from a great company right there. Certainly it's got its place in the industry, but we're at a time of smart materials, especially as I mentioned earlier, modified atmospheric plastics that can be put into rigid containers. We're very, very excited about that, and think we've got a couple cool things up our sleeve for that as well.
Dope, man. Hell yeah. Well, we're looking forward to it, honestly, especially innovation in this space. We're always looking forward to that. TerpLoc, grow bags, first smoke of the day. Jack, thank you for your time. We're out. Peace.
First Smoke family, If you want more video, unreleased content, stuff we can't put on YouTube, you want early drops, weeks and weeks in advance, FSOTD.com gets you all that. You become part of the family, you get hooked up with early content, you get unreleased content we can't put out on YouTube because we get age restricted and we get strikes, the whole deal. FSOTD.com gets you hooked up like family. But if you just want to keep watching, here we go. Let's let another one roll.